We can never predict the unexpected, and if catastrophe impacts you, how might it impact all parts of your life? Join us for today's show as we learn how to make a path forward. Welcome to Woman2Woman today, where we talk to inspiring women who are helping other women reach their goals and are changing traditional industries and roles in a very positive way. I'm your host, Jen Maceda, and on today's show, we are joined by Mary Ellen Wasielewski, founder, CEO, and president of BLT Strategies, a consulting firm that supports leaders in delivering extraordinary results even after personal catastrophes. Thanks for being with us today, Mary Ellen.
Thanks, Jen, for having me.
So you've got a story that helped you in the creation of this, these strategies that you help executives to go through. Tell us that story, if you would.
Probably about 15 years ago now, while vacationing with my children, I got the call that there was a fatal heart attack with my husband. All you have to hear is fatal. You don't need to hear the rest. And at that point, I was a stay-at-home mom, and now I had to pick up my life. I became instantly changed from married to single, from a supportive parent household to a one-parent household, and I had no career at that time. I had already put it on hold. So what you get is me rebuilding. And in that rebuilding process, I learned an awful lot of things that I did not see anybody else looking at or talking at, and that's what made me bring BLT to the forefront.
Yeah, because you didn't see the support that you needed. Were you searching for things that just weren't there?
I was sludging along like, cement boots were on you, and just day by day by day by day. I had a network of very good people around me, but it sometimes needs people from the outside.
Right.
And through some fates, let's call it, fates of the world, I landed in a position for which someone brought me into real estate, and he said to me, you come work for me because I know what you're going through. And I had met him and happened to meet him in church. It was the anniversary of the death of his daughter through breast cancer. So he understood, and he said, I can support you. And he did. And he supported me very well, brought me up on my career, understood when I was having those blank out moments that everybody who's gone through a catastrophe understands. And to the point that there are some funny things with it, is that I put a $1.8 million house on the market for $180,000. I thought it was so popular because they all called me. And then he went, no, not right.
Well, you talk about empathy and you talk about compassion. So what's the difference with empathy? Empathy is people, they understand what you're going through, but this gentleman was more compassionate.
Compassionate is, I want to help fix what you're going through. We all understand compassion. We all do it when we give of ourselves to someone else. And we do that because we feel good. There's a reward on both sides of it, but on the other, it's you're helping me fix, and it's often with people who have already gone through it.
Right.
Those are the people who understand more. Your support network of your neighbors and friends will always be there. But if they haven't walked the walk, it's a little harder to understand the constant crying or the emotions or the physical harm that comes up, all of those interactions that happen to you personally.
Well, I'm sorry that you went through that personally.
Thank you.
But in some ways, thank goodness for other people that you did, because you are now creating these tested strategies that are helping mostly career women to get themselves moving forward. And you say it's not just about career. Tell us what it is also about.
Anyone that goes through a transition, and we all go through transitions, from the smallest to putting your child on the bus for kindergarten for the first time, to the unthinkable death of someone that you love. Divorce is in there, grief, loss, any of that is a transition. And when we go through these transitions, they have multiple effects. That was what I was able to uncover. There's that we treat them now as just an emotional. And it is far from emotional. We figure that as women, we pick up our swords and we just keep plunging on. When we're at a greater risk to cost our companies a lot of money, if we go in, work extra hard, and then burn out, make mistakes, get ill, all of that costs the companies money. So in order to have that trickle-down effect where I can influence people in all levels, it has to start at the top. It's not going to come from the bottom, fixing this level and then going to the next and the next. If the senior leaders do not understand that compassion is costing them money, they're not going to start putting in the programs that you really do need in order to help you walk through this transition.
You know, I'm kind of surprised that, and I guess industry is very different, you know, than it was when I started out, probably 18 years ago, right? And it transitions every year, probably. But I'm surprised that it is still a majority male leader of a company, and that they would put in the time to hire somebody like your consulting team to come in and support people, especially women that have been dealing with traumatic experiences and with personal catastrophe, because they do have that mindset that, oh, she's just really emotional right now, and that's just a woman thing. And how is their mind being changed that they have to keep women at their company, one, and two, we need to make an environment that they can be okay with themselves and work on themselves, but also be productive for the business. There's a lot of data that is now coming out of what it's actually costing them. And so if you're talking about changing business, you really have to go back to the point of what business is there for. It's there to make money. Right. So if you hit them in the money pocket, they'll start listening to what you have to say. Sure. And it's not just with women. We work with men also, but anyone at those senior levels are the ones that bury themselves into business. And I started finding it because after Steve's death, I began to coach. And I was doing it just friend to friend. I would always hear about someone else. What transpired is the more years I had in there, the more I started getting people farther up a corporate ladder. And that's when I started to see more and more of this burnout. Most companies have a grief policy of 4 days. Okay, so 4 days, you go home, you deal with whatever you have to deal with, and you come back to work. 4 whole days. That's really good, huh? So you get 2 weeks for vacation, but 4 days is all they get. And that doesn't work. Where the umbrella really exists is getting them to understand it's 2 years before you're even ready to start back. In about 18 months, I started finding more and more of them were leaving their jobs. They were getting ill, they were changing positions, they were just fed up. They almost there, and they go, why? What is it all for? Right, because they're not dealing with all these different facets in their life, because it's not just career that you say, it's also emotional, spiritual, your complete comprehensive well-being. So they're not dealing with something, right? They're not dealing with a lot of it. So what they deal with it is the emotional. They get to bury that. They think it's all fine. But they're not dealing with the physical. The physical comes up with first sleepless nights. Well, if you go through sleepless nights, you have consequences because of that. Lack of eating. You have consequences because of that. You have a lack of a focus. Is that because you're not eating and sleeping? Maybe. Is that because you're so stressed? It's not. What I look at in all of these transitions is we are really in a chronic stress situation. And in a death, why I say 2 years, is the first year you walk through that numb. The second year, when most of your friends have left you and now you've got to go on, and you now begin your healing process in your second year. And people don't talk about it. And the more my goal is on shows like this, is just to get the word out there. These are symptoms. And if you recognize them as symptoms, you tend to be able to be like the boogeyman. It kind of goes away. Oh, I'm not sleeping because of this. Right. Oh, I'm not eating because of this. So you're explaining it to yourself. You're explaining it to yourself, and you're being gentle with yourself to say, give it up. We don't have to be carrying the swords, as I mentioned earlier, all the time. Okay. When we come back, we're going to talk more about that second year and what some of those strategies might be in order to move forward more easily. Stay with us. Welcome back. We are speaking with Mary Ellen Wasielewski Did I say
did
that
good.
right?
You did very good. There you go.
All right. I'm smiling, and this is such a heavy topic, but you bring such a level of authenticity and joy. Like, you're going to be okay. You go through this and you're going to be okay. So, in our last segment, you said that first year, all your friends are kind of like, okay, you should be done with this by now. Like, you've had a year. It's now time. Get out there, start dating. That's one example of a catastrophe that happens in people's lives. But what happens in that second year? You've got a great analogy that you shared with me.
Well, I try to explain to people that a transition is the end of one thing and the beginning of another. But it's never that easy because there's this abyss, there's this cavern that happens in between. So if you think of like a goblet, and then you imagine a goblet and you have a marble at the top of one side, that's the end. When that marble tips into the goblet, that's the beginning of your end. But a marble being round in a goblet is going to swing back and forth. We all hear about grief and the waves it comes. Those are kind of like the waves. It goes back and forth until that marble settles down. You cannot push it up to the other side to your new beginning. And that's really where the second year comes in. It's where, okay, it's beginning to settle. You are far from all the emotions. Every birthday is going to be triggering. Every Christmas is going to be triggering. But you also know you've really kind of got to start taking some bigger steps if you haven't already. And a lot of times you have, but it's the healing time. So that's where we come in and we try to support. So when I find that people support each other compassionately, specifically, with measurable, tangible things, that goblet is a lot more shallower.
And everybody kind of swings back and forth at different speeds, at different heights, at different levels. And so when you're saying it kind of levels out a bit and it becomes more shallow.
Then you can move on.
Got it.
And you get a chance and an opportunity to take any of that transition, no matter how bad it was, into a transformation. It's when we learn. There's an old saying, and I know you've heard this probably 100 times, there is no rainbow unless there's rain. So you can't get to that rainbow until you go through this. So let it out there. Let it be what it is. And the more you talk to people about it and the more you find support on it, the easier it's going to be on you. And find your tribe, whatever your tribe is.
Yeah. Well, you just brought up tribe. What's happening in our culture right now for women, there's been some great campaigns that have come through. They come through out of the rain and now are bringing rainbows for sure. But tell us a little bit about what's happening within our culture that is very similar to that and what you consider to be a caution that we should really be considering, we should be thinking about.
I think that we should be looking at the Me Too, the Time's Up, and the women gymnastics team. All of them have now come out very courageously to talk openly about sexual harassment. You think at this point because they've dealt with it the first time, now they bring it out and there's going to get some closure. Hopefully there's some more prison sentences. But it's not. For these women, what they need to all recognize is this is the beginning of your transition. That marble just went. It did not fall the first time you went through this. You buried that. And you had to for your own self. But now it's got to come out. And so they are going to be, without understanding it, feeling many of the symptoms of grief. They're going to go through the physical things of not sleeping, not eating, changing habits that way, emotional ones, losing focus, getting angry. Spiritually, every one of these transitions are spiritual. At every corner, you ask yourself, who am I? How did I get here? What am I doing? Where am I going next? Those are spiritual components that need to be answered so that you can keep going forward, and you answer them internally.
Yeah. It almost sounds like they have now re-stepped to the edge of the goblet, right? Because I don't want to say that this experience is relatable in a way of catastrophe, but when somebody loses their job, and this happened to a friend of mine recently, she shared her experience with me over 6 months, and this same thing had happened to me. I felt as though I had just stepped up to that goblet again. I was reliving all of the sense of loss and the sense of isolation and the sense, because she was going through it. And so is that another opportunity for these women who are in some ways now have a sense of strength that they can all move forward, and there will not be any retribution, and they will be listened to, they will be heard. What happens when they step back up to that goblet? You talk about the physical reactions that they're going to have. Will they dip in, and will it slide back and forth, as your analogy tells us?
I believe so. I believe it will slide back and forth. I believe that they will also have a great deal of more support out there, but it still is a journey that needs supported, but you have to walk it. So it's like a GPS. You've got your GPS and you know where you wanted to go, but you can go off to the right or the left. So you've got to bring it back in. Or, as we just mentioned, I came back from New Orleans and I saw this amazingly enormous barge and this tiny little tugboat that had to push it through the small of the river. Now that barge is fine out in the ocean by itself, but to get through this very narrow, tough path, it needed the support of that. Can't do it, the tugboat's not doing it for them, they're doing it together. And that's what they need to find, is whoever can support them through that together.
Right. Well, I almost think it's a little scary for all these different campaigns, because you get up to this one point, and we as women have never been at this point in our culture where it is acceptable to talk about it, and you do find support in it, because it was a real taboo subject, and you just didn't say anything because you would lose your job, or you would, for those gymnasts, they wouldn't be able to compete had they brought this forward. So, how can we all, as having a responsibility because we are women, how can we help these women who have been so brave? How can we help them to move forward?
If you know anyone, reach out to them personally. If you don't know them, there's enough addresses on the Me Too's or the Time's Up or any of those, and a lot of them are stars. Just because they are talented at something that they do as a career does not mean they're not human women who need support. Write a letter, reach out to them. Find people in your own community that has also gone through that, that's not going to get the publicity, that's not going to get on stage, and probably is never going to get their person, whoever did this to them, into the limelight. Support it that way. The Metro West Business...
The Metro West Conference for Women.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
So that's coming up. It's a great time to be talking about this to all of those. Because especially if you have women that are in my age bracket, we all came up
which is very similar to my age bracket.
Yeah. I just had my 63rd birthday. I'm a dyslexic, so I like to tell everybody I'm 36.
I love it.
So it works really well. But those women have all gone through it. We've all gone through it. Now, hopefully, most of us haven't gone to the level of rape or any of that. But we've all had to smile at things we didn't want to smile at, because otherwise we'd be considered that harsh person that doesn't want to cooperate. You needed to cooperate.
Yeah.
So we've all swallowed a lot.
Right.
So if we can all start to come out, we may be able to keep that pendulum from going from one side all the way to the other, where we've come out, we've stood our ground, we've done a Me Too, but we do not want it to go to the side where we are completely men haters and bashers. We want to find that respectful community of men that have always been there to come out and help support us too.
Right. And to say something when they see that this is happening within the... We also talked about within companies, there are some very high-level executives who have come forward with their own grief and made it more acceptable to talk about. So tell us about some of those.
Goodness, we're so happy to see that this is coming out and being talked about. So we have Sheryl Sandberg, which everybody pretty well comfortable with understanding that her husband passed away suddenly of a heart attack, and she had to come back. She is COO of Facebook. And in her transitions, not only did she have to walk publicly through all of this, as everybody had a microscope on her, but privately within Facebook, they really supported her, to the point that the CEO of Facebook and his wife came out and announced that they had had multiple miscarriages. Another grief scenario that was never talked about. And because of that compassion, he's actually started where you can have up to 20 days off for grief, for loss, for those transitions, supported by the company. That's huge.
It's a big difference. So 4 to 20.
4 to
That's
20,
a big difference.
right. And you don't have to take it.
No.
Because a lot of people do find that being at work gives them some
gives them-
support,
yes.
but you also get to say, I'm having a bad day today.
Right.
I got to get back.
Yeah.
I just finished Joe Biden's book about his son, and you saw the same thing. This is a person as vice president of the United States that couldn't say, oh, I'm sorry, my son's dying of cancer, I have to go over here.
Right.
He still had to perform. And because of that performing, what you do in the book is you actually get to see how he surrounded himself, whether it be his wife, who would say, we've got to slow down his meetings, or we've got to put him here, or even the Secret Service agents who actually got him to come in and out of the hospital so people didn't see what was going on. Those coming out of those very famous people helped bring this to the forefront. And it has helped us because now we're actually getting calls from people that we wouldn't have seen before.
Yeah.
So.
That's great. Well, we're so glad that you had a chance to come on this show and talk to this, because I think everyone goes through some level of traumatic experience and personal catastrophe, and dealing with it within a career and being given that level of support and those strategies is so critical to not just our careers, but also to our personal well-being and our personal growth. So thank you, Mary Ellen, for creating BLT Strategies as well, and a whole team of people that focus on this every day. So.
Oh, thank you very much for having me. The more we talk about it, the more it comes out of the closet and people can heal.
That's right.
Okay.
Good. Thank you. So if you want to learn more from Mary Ellen, please visit our She's Local blog post on our website at www.woman2woman.today. And please remember to follow, like, and subscribe to Woman2Woman Today on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube so you don't miss a show. Thanks to the entire team at Access Framingham, especially Shavarsh Morrissey. Thanks also to Jess Friswell, our assistant producer. I'm Gemma Seda, your host of Woman2Woman Today. Thanks for watching, everyone. See you next time, where we hope to inspire you.